37. I gave out some of these verses to be read last week, so I'm going to see if anyone remembers what verses they had. And I know that might be a bit difficult to try to determine, but I want to make sure that we know who's reading what. Is there anyone here tonight that, I think I had Joe read, he was going to read Song of Solomon 8:6. He's not here tonight. I don't see him. So, all right, Mike, I'll have you read that one. Proverbs 6:34, was there someone I gave that to? John, you had that? Okay, great. And then Proverbs 3:27, Richard, you had that one. 1 Thessalonians 1:2, Greg, you had that one. And then 1 Thessalonians 5:18. Did anyone have that? All right, Mike, I'll have you read that. And then Philippians 4:6, was there someone who had that verse? Okay, Neil. All right, great. We're considering Joseph's unfair situation. We looked at point 1 last week. If you're following along with the outline, I want to give you these blanks from point 1. We saw that Joseph was thrust into a situation that was beyond his control, and it was, quite honestly, by every person's account, as we read it for face value, it would be considered unfair. We would look at Joseph's situation and say, how unfair. It's not right. It doesn't equate. He didn't do anything to deserve this. His father gave him a coat of many colors. His father preferred him over his other sons. As a matter of fact, the Bible even says that Jacob loved him more than the rest of his children. So Joseph had nothing to do with that. And he then puts Joseph in an unfair situation. He has him go to check on his brothers, and as he does so in his royal garb, his royal coat, so to speak, his brothers see that, and his brothers take matters into their own hands, and at first they want to kill him, but Reuben, the oldest, decides, well, let's not do that. Why don't we put him in this pit, throw him in this pit, and we'll decide what to do here a little later. Maybe we'll kill him later, maybe we'll do something else to him, but let's not do that right now. And so they do that, only to decide a bit later to sell him, and to sell him specifically into slavery. I want to pick up the reading in Genesis chapter 37, and let's read starting at verse 18. And when they saw him afar off, even before he came near unto them, they conspired against him to slay him. And they said one to another, Behold, this dreamer cometh. Come now therefore, and let us slay him, and cast him into some pit. And we will say, Some evil beast hath devoured him, and we shall see what will become of his dreams. And Reuben heard it, and he delivered him out of their hands. And he said, Let us not kill him. And Reuben said unto them, Shed no blood, but cast him into this pit that is in the wilderness, and lay no hand upon him, that he might rid him out of their hands, to deliver him to his father again. And it came to pass, when Joseph was come unto his brethren, that they stripped Joseph out of his coat of many colors that was on him. And they took him and cast him into a pit. And the pit was empty, there was no water in it. And they sat down to eat bread, and they lifted up their eyes and looked, and behold, a company of Ishmaelites came from Gilead with their camels, bearing spicery and balm and myrrh, going to carry it down to Egypt. And Judah said unto his brethren, What profit is it if we slay our brother and conceal his blood? Come, and let us sell him to the Ishmaelites, and let not our hand be upon him, for he is our brother and our flesh. And his brethren were content. Then were passed by Midianites, merchantmen, and they drew and lifted up Joseph out of the pit, and sold Joseph to the Ishmaelites for 20 pieces of silver. And they brought Joseph into Egypt. And Reuben returned unto the pit, and behold, Joseph was not in the pit, and he rent his clothes. And he returned unto his brethren, and said, The child is not, and I, whither shall I go? And they took Joseph's coat, and killed a kid of the goats, and dipped the coat in the blood. And they sent the coat of many colors, and they brought it to their father, and said, This have we found. Know now whether it be thy son's coat or no. And he knew it, and said, It is my son's coat. An evil beast hath devoured him. Joseph is without doubt rent in pieces. And Jacob rent his clothes, and put sackcloth upon his loins, and mourned for his son many days. And all his sons and all his daughters rose up to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted. And he said, For I will go down into the grave unto my son mourning. Thus his father wept for him. And the Midianites sold him into Egypt unto Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh's and captain of the guard. I'm going to pray here one more time, and I'm going to pray for this message. But I want to look at number one. We saw this and we considered choose activity over passivity. One of Jacob's big errors was choosing to be a passive parent. Letter A, his older sons were seething with hatred, and yet we don't read of Jacob doing anything about it. Jacob contributed to this situation by preferring his son and loving his son Joseph over the others, and that created a real problem that led to this whole situation that now we see, where Joseph has been sold into slavery and where he has been framed up as being killed by a wild beast and presented to his father as being killed, and yet in reality he was sold away. He put Joseph in some difficult positions with his brothers by not understanding the situation and protecting him properly. And I wrote this, number one, may God help us to be perceptive to those we are leading. The key is engagement, not disengagement. And then number two, don't allow past failures to hinder your current involvement. I believe that Jacob felt like his hands were tied. And I think he probably wrongfully thought to himself, I've created this mess. I've had children by 4 different women, and we're all trying to live as one big happy family, but we're anything but. We're one big massive dysfunction. And God never condoned having more than one wife anyhow, but culturally it was accepted. So Jacob went along with that, and now he's looking at the mess that is before him, and he probably thinks to himself, there's nothing I can do. I guess I'll just console myself by loving my son, because the girl, the woman who I truly have loved all these years, has finally born a couple of sons, and I'll just throw all my passion and energy into them. Well, that was wrong. He should have intervened even further and taken leadership. And I do think that sometimes our past failures hinder us from current involvement, whether it be as parents, whether it be as employers or leaders on the job or leaders in our communities or in some way. We say to ourselves, well, I messed up, and so there's no way that I can take leadership now and really affect any kind of difference or change now, and that's not the case. Yes, if we have blown it, we should acknowledge that. We should make those things right, especially with the people that they need to be made right with, make things right with God, but then we move on, and we don't allow what's been done in the past to hold us back. I think there are some well-meaning Christians who want to move forward for God, but they're held back by their past. They're held back by a foolish decision they made maybe earlier in life, or they're held back by something they did that they're not proud of, or they're held back by making a mess of things, and now they see that mess and they think, well, I guess I have to live with this, rather than truly trying to look to God to see how to rectify it and make it better. So we think about all that. We move to number two. Here's another thought about how we can avoid the fairness focus in our lives, because we get caught up in that sometimes. What's fair and what's not fair? Well, we understand life's not fair, but we understand that God is always faithful, and God is always good, and he's working all things together for good. Be encouraged with that tonight. Secondly, choose appreciation over jealousy. Now, Jacob had his problems, but Jacob's sons had some serious problems as well. I don't want to make it sound as though they were justified in their jealousy. They weren't. Yes, their dad had created a wrong, dysfunctional situation, but that didn't mean that they were justified to literally hate their brother and to have jealousy consuming them. Jealousy, I wrote, is like a cancer, and it will eventually destroy a person. If it's not dealt with, if it's not confessed, if it's not made right, it will eventually destroy somebody. And, envy and jealousy, that's not always even clearly seen. Some people are good at hiding those things. Maybe it's not out front as much, but it might be something that inwardly is tearing somebody up. And there's covetousness in the heart, or there's envy and jealousy. And these are the kinds of sins that I think a lot of Christians maybe deal with, and they conceal it, and they hide it, and they don't deal with it. Well, jealousy will eventually overtake us. Song of Solomon 8:6. Song Song of Solomon is a beautiful book. It's got a lot of poetry. It's a love book of poetry from King Solomon to his wife. But did you notice that phrase in there? Jealousy is as cruel as the grave. There's some ways that the Lord has worded things that only he can word them, and we ought to take to heart that statement. Jealousy is as cruel as the grave. And you know, we see it even in the early ages of our children. It comes, I think, to the forefront in junior high, 6th, 7th, 8th grade. And, you know, one young person is really upset because that girl stole the boy that I liked, or now I'm jealous, and I just, you know, they can get really angry about that. And some of those base human flaws and tendencies come out in a way that is raw and unguarded and unhinged in those early ages, as they have not fully developed and they don't know how to contain things as well. And maybe in some ways that's good, because we can see, boy, that person's rife with jealousy. That junior higher is just seething with hatred towards the other one, and you know, the drama is thick, and those things aren't hidden as well at that pre-adolescent stage. And maybe we grow older and we become adults and we still deal with some of those things, but we cover it up better. Just understand something: if we don't give it over to God, jealousy is as cruel as the grave, and it will overtake us. Proverbs 6:34, who has that? John? Jealousy is the rage of a man. And boy, that's a sobering verse. And there's something, you know, in law enforcement, there's something in law that's called crimes of passion. And I hate to even entertain the thought of that, but sometimes there's jealousy that comes in when someone has involved themselves with someone's spouse and so forth, and it's an ugly thing that happens. And jealousy can be the rage of a man, and men can do unpredictable, scary, violent things if they're full of jealousy. And so we must say, Lord, help me not to become a jealous person. And then all of us should work overtime to make sure we're not creating jealousy in the hearts maybe of our spouse or of someone that we shouldn't. And I think we should all, as brothers and sisters in Christ, have good relationships with one another and love each other. But we should never even give the hint that there might be something, that would cause jealousy in our spouse or in our family. Let's do all we can to present what is right and to live right and to be sure that we're going about this in a right and proper way. I covered some things on Sunday night, and one of the things I covered business-wise was that I'm finally going to have some office administration secretarial help here at the church, and I've asked my sister to come, and she's going to be here 2 days a week on Tuesday mornings and Thursday mornings most weeks. And I've never had that since the church started. Not that we have never had plenty of people who are capable, especially ladies. I think since the early times of our church, we've had ladies who could do that. But I've never wanted to put myself in a situation where it's me and another lady here working together. Now, my sister, that's doable, but I couldn't do that with anyone else. So that's why that's taken so much time. And I've always been able to, with an assistant pastor, especially when Aaron was here, to cover all the office stuff and do all the ministry stuff. And when Chris came on, I specifically didn't want to lay everything upon him that Brother Kushel had, specifically with the mindset that, hey, I want to hire on an office admin, but I want to do it in a right and proper way. Well, having my sister here, that was the perfect answer for all of those things. And why is that? Well, what's the matter, Pastor? You couldn't trust yourself with someone who wasn't your spouse? No, that's not the thing. But it's just even the presentation of, hey, there's two cars there. It's Pastor's car and it's Mrs. So-and-so's car, and they're always there at the church. I wonder, I don't even want to create a question in someone's mind. We have to be on guard against that, because jealousy can become the rage of a man, and it's created a lot of unfortunate further sins if it's not been dealt with, and if it's gone unchecked, or if it's been created in someone's life. We see this: Jacob's outright favoritism created deep hurt, animosity, and envy amongst his family. You see what happened with Jacob? He created a lot of other sins because of what he did with his outright favoritism for his son Joseph. So I've already just touched on this, but don't ignite jealousy. Don't ignite jealousy. Don't even do that amongst your children. Don't do that with your spouse. Don't do that with friends. Guard against that. Letter B, rather than succumbing to feelings of jealousy and rage, those of us who might be experiencing this need to say this: God, give me a genuine appreciation and compassion for others. Now, maybe we're feeling envy or jealousy in our heart. It's not because it's been ignited or created. We're just dealing with that because we compare. And we play the comparison game. And we look and say, well, how come that person has that? How come that person lives there? Why does that person bless with that much money? Why? And we go down the list. And this is the problem with the comparison game. We look at our life and we say, life is not fair. Joseph could have, right at this moment as he was sold into slavery, said to himself, you know what? This is the rawest, most messed up deal anyone could ever be given. I just got thrown into slavery. I'm the favored son of Jacob. And now look at me. What did I do to deserve this? And from that moment on, you know what he could have done? He could have decided that he was going to be a victim. He could have decided that, this is not right. I'm a victim. I didn't deserve it. And he could have played the victim card and had a victim's mentality. But he doesn't do that. Never does he have that kind of a mindset. And I'm glad he doesn't, because he shows us the way to deal with life, especially when life is ugly and raw and unfair. Ask God for appreciation and compassion for others. Who has Proverbs 3:27? One of the ways we can combat jealousy and envy is give appreciation, genuine appreciation for people. Don't withhold good from people when it's in the power of thine hand to do it. That helps us with these things. Who has 1 Thessalonians 1:2? Paul mentioned, even when he was going to write some hard things to the churches, we thank God for you. We mention you always in our prayers. I might even have to say some hard things to you as I write the inspired word of God, but we thank God for you. We appreciate you, and we mean that. 1 Thessalonians 5:18. In everything give thanks. So show thankfulness. Show appreciation. Show compassion for others, and that will help us to guard against an envious spirit. There's a little quote I have here, and I heard this when I was in Bible college from a pastor who came one time, and he preached a message, and the whole message was centered on this one phrase: our situation is no longer fair when we begin to compare. Our situation is no longer fair when we begin to compare. So I've got a remedy for that. Don't compare. Don't compare. God gave you what he wanted you to have. God has a specific purpose for where he put you, for who he gave you, for what he's doing with you, and just say, Lord, I'm thankful for that. Remember when the Lord was talking to Peter after he was dealing with Peter in regards to the fact that he had denied him and so forth, and he's actually explaining to Peter how he's going to die later. And, Peter, being Peter, he's taking this in, and he looks over and he sees the Apostle John. And his response to Jesus explaining to him how he's going to die a martyr's death, but how he's going to be used of God in a great way. I'm going to use you in this way, Peter, but you're going to die. You're going to pay a price for that. And then Peter says, well, what about him? That's kind of what I would probably do. Well, what about Matt? What about Doug? He needs to be told something like that too. Why are you picking on me? And you know what the Lord said to him? He said, you don't worry about him. I'm talking to you. If I decide whatever I want to decide about John, then so be it. But I'm not talking to John. I'm talking to you. And do you know that God makes everything personal to us? What he's doing in your life is personal to you. And I think the quicker we understand that God loves us. He has a specific plan, purpose, and will for us. The quicker we can get over whatever we think is unfair and say, Lord, I'm going to leave this with you, and I'm going to do the very best I can with what you've given me, and I'm going to trust you to help me where I'm at, to bloom where I've been planted, to be blessed in the way that only you can bless me. And I'll trust you in the areas where I don't understand everything. Number 3, choose prayer over worry and despair. And that's the final thought tonight. Now, we're not told if Jacob and Joseph turned to God in prayer. Joseph certainly would later. But in this moment, we're not told if Jacob and Joseph turned to God in prayer, but we can assume that they did in order to move forward. Letter A, prayer is the antidote to our natural responses. Who has Philippians 4:6? Be careful for nothing. That means worry about nothing, but pray about everything. Let your requests be made known unto God with prayer and supplication. Let's take those worries and give them over. And just understand this. We're going to have times in our life where we're going to feel like worrying and despairing. But sometimes the Lord will put us in desperate situations. And that's what the Lord did right here with Joseph. He put him in a desperate situation. And believe me, he's beyond desperate. He's sold into slavery. He's going to make it into Potiphar's house, and he's going to think that things are great for a while until things become really even more desperate. And it's still nothing that he has done. Sometimes we are put into desperate, seemingly almost impossible situations, and we might think to ourselves, what did I do to deserve this? Well, you did nothing. God's doing something. And we can't see what he's doing, but we need to be patient, wait, and trust him through the process. He is bringing something together through it all. And we can look to God, and we can talk to God, and we can trust him. Amen? We got about 7 minutes. Let's get together, find someone to pray with, and then I'll come up and close.